anticipatory design scientist. So you have everything together in one person. And the main reason why he was, or the main reason for his creativity or the way he found things, because he saw the future. And as Sir was describing about Richard Rogers the other day, this architect was also one person who could see the future which others could not see, and he questioned the present, and he kind of opened the eyes of his contemporaries towards the future. So this architect is also called, is also referred to as the true fountainhead. And so what's up, a few of his questions, what he questioned on was, why do buildings on land have this peculiarity, and why are buildings on land different from the other forms that we use in sea or sky, like flights or ships? Why do they differ? And his understanding, or what he said, was that the buildings on the surface of the earth are mostly built like fortresses, which are usually very heavy and thick, and they kind of like to protect us. But that might have been the need once, but right now that is not the need. Where a sense of security is required, but that is not the primary motive. But the primary motive is a comfortable place to live, to be, and to be happy. So he constantly looked or compared to the elements in nature, the elements which are built in other areas, and he brought that to architecture, he brought that to product design, and that's how he invented. So he says that he is not creating or inventing anything, but he's just observing what is there in the environment, and then he was creating out of it. So this image on the left hand side is an illustration by Times Magazine about Buckminster Fuller. So I kind of really like this image because it summarizes almost all his philosophies and most of his great inventions. So we see that his face, and then on top of on his forehead we see a geodesic dome, and on the left hand side geodesic dome was one of his or the ultimate form of his creation, which was still then not there, and now it is very common. And on the right hand side we see an aeroplane lifting this dome and dome. So this was a way how we transported these geodesic domes, which were used as shelters for low cost shelters, and this is how he transported them. And then you see apartments, and this apartment also, it looks kind of very different from the normal apartments that we would see. And this is why he's called a futuristic architect, because at that time nobody had even imagined about this kind of apartments. And we see, and on the right hand side we see, on the bottom we see a car with two wheels in the front and one wheel behind. So this was also one of his creations. So we will see, we will come into the details of all of this. So the principle, or there was only one principle which he believed, which he said was a universal principle for anything on earth, and he dedicated his entire life in trying to find what this principle was. By observing the environment, by observing the earth, by observing the physics of what is around him, he realized that there has to be a way by which we can build more with less. And this is the reason why he was called a mad genius also. So I have a small clip over here, which shows about, which gives an introduction on who this person was. One sec. I think I didn't share my system's audio. I'll just stop sharing and share once more.
Yeah, take your time, Jason. No issues.
Yes. So I hope screen is visible. And
Yes.
it's audible. Yes.
Buckminster Fuller, the man you just heard from, is an engineer, inventor, mathematician, and philosopher.
He has been called a visionary, a prophet, a genius. Mr. Fuller, of all of the people that I have interviewed, you are the most difficult to define. You have called yourself a random element. Other people have called you an experience.
An author, a designer, a scientist.
He's even a cosmologist, which I neither know how to spell nor do I know what it is. A New World thinker, if there ever was one, or Buckminster Fuller.
Okay, so that was a small introduction about Buckminster Fuller.
Great.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah, okay. Because the video was playing, I just had it out. Yeah, okay. So yes, to proceed further, so this is what I was explaining of how the principle that he followed on what to do, how to do more with less material. And because of this, because of his thought, how he was different adjectives were used in order to describe him. So he was called as an intellectual outlaw, as a mad genius. So you observe that it's a contradicting words, like an outlaw or a mad genius. So all these were used to describe him. And this was again because of the fact that he was a genius, obviously, but because he had this own interpretation of the world, which he found out through his life, which he made others also see. And in his book, so he has written about more than 30 books and other publications. So in his book called The Spaceship Earth, so he called Earth as a spaceship in which we all are living. And in that, he questions all these existing beliefs and methods in which other built forms are built in the world, and he questions why it has to be done so, and he reasons them out, and he encourages people to think beyond what is existing. So this was just an introduction, and we will go into detail on how he found out what he believed was the ultimate truth, and how he proved that this ultimate truth helps for the betterment of mankind. So he was born in 1895, and as a student, he was very peculiar. He was good in a few subjects, but he was not very good in other few subjects. So he was good in math, physics, etc., but he was not very good in several other subjects. So he was, in general, he was not a very good student, but he was very optimistic about everything. And since childhood, so there's a documentary which where his teachers say that since childhood he had that creativity in him. So when one small assignment was given to him, where they had to use sticks and clay in order to make a small model, when all the students made simple houses or simple geometric forms which they saw around them, it is said that Buckminster Fuller created a tetrahedron which was not even known to them at that time. So he had that creativity, or that the inventing attitude since childhood. And um, and he was very, and the most important part was he was very optimistic about it. So he believed that there were no failures in life, it was just unexpected outcomes. And he kept exploring on these unexpected outcomes to an extent that he kind of redefined what is expected also. And he had a very fun-filled youth, and to say that he was even expelled from Harvard University on two occasions. That is, first because he was partying too much in the university, and second because the professors felt that he did not have interest in the subject that he was studying. So, but this did not demotivate him, and he started taking blue-collar jobs after that, which he really enjoyed. And because he enjoyed working with heavy machinery, creating machines, and working on the field, he liked doing that. And this also gave him insights on the conventional working principle of different machines. And this kind of led him to think about all these or to develop all these inventions which he found later. And as a turning point, what is marked is that Fuller's first child, who was born around during the World War One time, but a few years later, she died of polio and paralysis. So, and this was before, when she was less than 4 years old. So, and Fuller felt that it was because of the poor conditions of his home. That is, it was a very draft and dampy conditions that he had in his home, and it was because of this that his daughter could not sustain. And he felt that had his conditions been better, then it would have been better for the kid also. So in after this, he started a company with his father-in-law, who was also an architect. So he started a company to make weatherproofing sheets or fireproofing sheets that can be used as a material for housing, and which is easily affordable to people. So till then, whatever fireproofing was there was not affordable to local people, and because of that, it was never used in houses. And that was one of the reasons which he felt why his daughter could not be saved. So he felt that that should not happen to anybody else, and for this he wanted to make this affordable to everybody. And this incident, his daughter's death, is claimed by several researchers as to the reason why Fuller kind of fully dedicated his entire life into finding what is the fundamental truth of the universe, trying to find something new. And his motive was that to find it for everybody, because he realized that the problems which were existing in the world, and the main problem was that there was not adequate material or adequate resources to provide for everybody. And this is the reason why most of the people were facing difficulties. And in order to and for the betterment of everybody, it was important to save resources and, most importantly, use resources wisely. And this is what led on to his design approach, which became the law later on, doing more with less. So this is what he dedicated himself to. And he decided that so he decided to dedicate himself to a new experiment. And this experiment was to find how one person alone, that is he himself, how one person could do to help humanity by doing more with less. So this is how he started, and later a lot of people started joining him. So he was teaching as a faculty later, and students started following him, and that's how he developed his philosophy of doing more with less. So he started as a single man with just by observing the environment and observing what can be done so that we can do more with less. And his first success, or his first presentation or in public, was when he during the Great Depression, there was housing shortage, and in order to curb this, Fuller was commissioned to design low cost housing. And excuse me, sorry, yeah. And he came up with this Dimaxion house, which was very unconventional at that time. So as you can see in the image, it doesn't rest on a plane, but it has a central column, and it is supported through tension, like you have strings holding it in place. So this was a very unconventional approach at that time, and he presented this as a low cost housing method. And this
रोटी
was
के
kind
साथ वो खाऊंगा
and this was kind of automated house which had a lot of advanced technological features in it, which did not to the user, which did not look very low cost. But he found a method to build this in, or he proposed this as a low cost housing method. And the term that he used, Dimaxion, this
बना दो
term was later used for all his inventions, and this was a term which he coined, which adds or it's a joining of different words, such as, which stands for dynamic, maximum, and tension. So because he believed that a right mix of all these three elements in a proper proportion will help in achieving more with less, which was what he wanted to do. So this was the Dimaxion house. So here I have a small video of Fuller introducing a small clip of Fuller introducing the Dimaxion house. Oops.
Do you have some sound for this?
Is it not coming? Sound was not coming.
Not coming.
No.
Okay, I think I'll just share it once more. I don't know what happened.
But lovely presentation, just Shivangi, I think you have the same.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank you,
is it?
Sir, for just a lovely presentation.
Thank you, Shivangidi. Thank you, sir. Okay, so is it coming now?
Yeah, it's coming.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a first and very crude paper model of a house designed for industrial reproduction. Its requirements must be that it should be proof against fire, flood, tornado, earthquake, electrical storms, marauders. It must be proof against drudgery, that is, in it must be accessories with which a housewife can accomplish all her house cleaning within 15 minutes.
Yes, so that was about Fuller talking about the house. So as you heard him, he's saying that this is there's a fireproof material. A housewife can, or a household can easily clean the room. So everything was designed in such a way. It was compact. It was so if you can see the interiors also, he ensured that the materials also are good enough so that it can be cleaned easily. And the cupboards and shelves, everything were very much advanced. So last I'll show a small documentary. So in that all these cupboards, how they function. So he had rotating cupboards to save space, and in furniture he had storage. So all these right now also a lot of architects are trying to do, and we might see it as advanced cupboard or shelving methods in Instagram or Pinterest, which is not very common even now. But he had proposed this at that time for this low cost housing. So he showed that luxury can be, even luxury can be given at a low cost, and it is not it's not that I mean, by luxury what I meant is more comfortable elements. It is not a luxury to have more comfortable elements inside a house, but by using low cost materials and by planning these systems or planning the house in a proper way, we can achieve this. So in the documentary also we would see that people were awed by this design, and no, and obviously it was not accepted at first. People found it very hard to accept this as a house. So he used materials which are normally used to build air jets and ships to build this house. So that was that this, it didn't feel like a house, what is what his contemporaries commented. And they were also very much concerned about the shape of the house, a circular shape. Till then no house was built in a circular shape, and to this he very coolly answers, asking why can't it be a circular shape, why can't we use these shipping materials, why do we have to stick with whatever, with the normal rigid fortress kind of materials that we're normally using. So he questioned that, and even though it was not a success in the first, few years later different architects started appreciating this, and right now it is very much appreciated for his thoughtful vision on how he created this. And the second one is the Dimaxion car, which he proposed. So this was the three-wheeled car which we saw in the first one. So this again was a very unconventional invention, and people were very skeptical about it. So even though the card was a success in this, he presented it, and there were around uh, f- uh, three companies who wanted to invest in the car. They even paid advance payment, etc. But then during his presentation in the World's Fair, what happened was the car met with an accident, and at that time it was believed, or it was said, that it's because the car toppled itself because it was a three-wheeled car, and because of that all these investors withdrew and the car could not be sold in market. But later it was found that the accident was not because of the car toppling, but because another vehicle came and hit. So this was explained in the documentary, which we will explain very much in detail in the documentary that we will see later. So yeah, so this was a car, and Norman Foster is recently who is a disciple of Buckminster Fuller, has recently made a realistic model of this car, and he's still using this. And so prior to the car, he made a 2D vehicle. So this was again, it was a very futuristic design because it used materials which had not been invented. So he wanted to use these the materials which are used in jet engines. He proposed this, but because those materials or elements were not available, it was never made. But recently, or in a 2013 article, these sketches have been brought out, and how he thought envisioned about these materials and these designs. So he called it as a 4D vehicle, so it can run on both water, land, and sea. So that's how he made it. So it's like a it can be used everywhere. And this was something which he did before the Dimaxion car, and based on this he made the Dimaxion car. And then comes his most renowned invention, which is the Geodesic Dome. So this was, as I was saying, so he was Fuller was teaching at Black Mountain College in North Carolina at that time, and this was between 1948 to 1950 that time. And so with a group of professors and students, he started creating this project called the Geodesic Dome. So his idea was that, in later we will you will be learning. So mostly it is always the compression forces which are used in any building. That is, you have supports and then you have a roof, and the roof kind of compresses the support or the columns which are there. So if you have a beam and if you have a column, the column is a compression member. So that is how normally buildings were made. But Fuller explored this beyond, and he wanted to try something more, and he created tension based structures, or his geodesic dome basically stands on tension. And this is uh, if you observe on the figure below, no member figure in the left hand side, it said that there is no member which is under compression over here. It's all, so because it is stretched and it spans on to the other node, it's under full tension, and it is that tension which holds it in place. So these continuous tension, and they form a single force compression members. It is so basically these tension later converts to so compression members is what is said. So it's only tension which is working, but it acts like a compression which gives a dome like effect which is there. So this is the principle that he used. And so this one quote of his is very motivating, because he felt that we should not fight the forces. So when we're using more compressive members, what we're doing is we're actually fighting the forces. That we have a force, we're using compression to hold that structural member in place. But he felt that instead of fighting them, why can't we use them to our advantage? And that is what these tensile members does, or the tension does, because it spans out to all the tension and it uses that in order to create that form. And his first geodesic dome he created in about 1959, and this is what he presented also. And he got later he became famous because of this complete geodesic dome. And then comes his geodesic biosphere, which he presented at Montreal Expo in 1967. And the structure is still there. I have an image of this structure, which is their Montreal Biosphere. So here we can see that he was not just an engineer who wanted to create these tension compression, but again his architectural and artistic skills also come into play over here. So we observe how within this biosphere we have a building inside. So the framing on how he wanted the entire skyline of this place to be, how he envisioned that also creates a lot of awe to us even today. And on the right hand side, we observe an illustration which is made based on his idea, where he wanted to create such kind of housing blocks to normal people also. Like, so on the left, what you see is something which is made for a large scale, for an entire cityscape. But over here, what you observe is for normal people also, for a normal housing also, how this can be translated. So this was one of his ideas, which was there, and which was later in 2013 illustrated and published to explain his ideas, which could not be built. And yes, and this is the city, the light city, which he proposed, or an apartment. So based on his Dimaxion house, he extended it to a Dimaxion apartment also, where where multiple occupants can live. And you see again in this also, it is fully suspended. You have a central column, and everything is suspended from this column. So this was also very unconventional at that time. And adding on further unconventional was this, where he created temporary houses. So in the first image, we saw aeroplanes shifting these temporary houses. So this was a temporary shed which he made using his geodesic dome, which can be taken or easily transported from place to place for migrant workers, for construction workers, etc., and easily assembled on site. So this again gave an opportunity for to provide good, comfortable, and good quality housing or shelter to these migrant workers or construction workers who till then lived in very poor, unhygienic conditions. And I think so. This is what were normally built, but his ideas and his thoughts does not end over here. There are even more elements which he designed but he could not build. And to talk about those, one is mainly the floating city. So he wanted to create a floating city which can be about a mile wide, and it can either be placed in water, or it can keep floating on water. So at that time he could not build it because he did not have enough resources and support to do it, because actually building the Dimaxion car itself kind of made him a bit bankrupt, because he spent his spent his own money and he had taken some on loan, and because the car could not be on market, he did not he faced a huge loss at that time, and he did not have much money. So all these other ideas, he could not materialize it because of lack of support, and he couldn't fund himself also. But he believed that it is possible to do this. So he even had it said that he even had the materials which are used in jets and ships, and he even had a plan on how these floating cities can be made. So on the top we see a tetrahedral floating city, and then on bottom we see a tritron floating city. So for different combinations on, and these cities where it can be held together, that is, these can be separated, and these can be connected by small bridges. So he even add those plans on how these different cities can be connected. And so it said that one city can hold up to 5,000 people. And it's not just living spaces, but also outdoor spaces, other shopping, entertainment, schools, etc. All these where he had planned all these in these floating cities. And the highlight was that these were low cost living. And it was not because it's floating, it was not a luxury apartment that he was building. Even though these conditions were there, he still claimed that it is going to be a low cost housing solution. So these were his inventions, and then comes his Dimaxion Map, which has inspired a lot of research later. So his idea was that whatever we see, or whatever the globe that we have, there are a lot of distortions in it. It doesn't actually give a whole view of the spherical face of the earth, or for instance, what we see on how the geographical and political borders are marked, that doesn't give us an idea of earth as a whole, but it gives us a local parts, or different parts which we see on the map. But so as I said in the introduction, he dedicated his entire life in finding the universal truth. And the universal truth that he found was that everything has to be seen together as one whole principle, and things should not be separated into different groups. Only if we see everything as one single entity can we actually create in that. So this is what he talks about in his Spaceship called Earth, the book called Spaceship called Earth also, where he says that the globe, or the Earth, is one spaceship, and it is just one whole spaceship in which we are there. And in order to understand that, or to understand this, or to feel this entire spaceship as a whole, or as its whole, we need to first see what it is. So he created this map of the earth, so that when you stretch it onto a flat surface, it is none of the parts of the earth are distorted, and we can combine it on to create a not a sphere, but a geometrical form, so that we can see all the different places in a ball, or in that particular shape. So he did towards his life at the university. He dedicated his later years in doing creative it's stuff like this, where he played with geometries, where he tried creating geometric forms and tried to understand this universal truth. So that's what he was working on. And and as I was saying, he published more than 30 books. And the first book, what you see, where my cursor is, if my cursor is visible, the operating manual for Spaceship on Earth, this is a very famous book. And I happened to read this book, and I must say that it is a very good read. It's very much inspiring also, because it again it's not only for architects, it is for anybody. He mainly narrates his story as a navigator, and he was a navigator, so he mainly narrates his story as a navigator, and he connects to building on the surface, or on earth, with respect to his navigation principle. And he talks about how those navigation, so he claims that navigators are stronger than the people who rule the land, because they do not know what are the hardships. So to be a navigator, we need to know what is happening in the environment, to look at the vastness of the sea and the clouds, and then to realize which direction to navigate. So he uses those principles to build buildings on Earth. So that is something. It's a very good read. And yes, so the why he calls it as the operating manual is because he claims that the Earth is a spaceship, and this spaceship came with no manual, and that is the reason why. And people have been creating in their own way. If we can understand the holistic principle of the Earth and create a manual for this, and if every person starts working towards the betterment of others, then this Earth will start working towards the favor of us. So this is the principle, or this is the conclusion that he draws after understanding the whole Earth as a single entity. So when he died, he this is what he wrote in his tomb. Like, he wanted to be written. He wanted him to be called as a trim tab. So a trim tab is a small navigation in a ship. It's a small what do you say? It's like steering, like a small steering, which is used in order to change direction of the ship by. Yeah, so he wanted to call himself that because he felt that just like how a trim tab is used in order to change direction and to move on to the right direction, he felt that if he strategically applies his energy, then he could steer anything. And what he wanted to steer was better overall holistic betterment of mankind. So he felt that his energy can be concentrated towards steering this betterment of mankind in betterment. So that's what he wrote in his tomb. So he lived his entire life for the betterment of mankind, and even when he died, he wanted to be remembered as this trim tab, which can be used in order to which can be used for the holistic development of others. So that was from my part. So here I have a small documentary video. So this is a bit long, it's 20 minutes, but I think I can go ahead with this video. There are so many documentaries on Buckminster Fuller because obviously he is we cannot stop talking about him. If we read any book about him, we find more interesting ideas. In his own books written by other people about him. So this documentary is something which I found very interesting, was because a lot of great architects who are great architects right now, whose work we admire, these architects are talking about Buckminster Fuller as their mentor and his philosophies through their eyes. So it is anytime better than us or normal people like me explaining about Buckminster Fuller, to hear through these words through these words of these great architects. It's really motivating. So I think I will play this right now. Just confirm whether the audio is there.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely wonderful.
I think audio is not started. So this is from Ivory Press. Yeah, audio is there, right?
Yes. Yes,
yeah, it's there. Yeah.
People say to me, I wonder what it'd be like to be on a spaceship. And I say to you, you don't really realize what you're doing. Because everybody is an astronaut. You all live aboard a beautiful little spaceship called Earth.
Fuller, either he's not an architect or he's the only architect. He tried to think, what's the architecture of the invisible, of the cosmos? And for him, this was not just a kind of a metaphor. He really thought that there was a kind of a secret structure to everything. He thought the way we made our buildings, the way we make our cities was completely stupid. He thought there was a kind of a magic in the universe. And this, of course, means for many people, he was an unbelievably romantic figure, charismatic, mystical guru. And many other people that hated him.
All of his concepts, I think, are they try to reach an idealized, perfect sort of a solution, you might say. He's always going beyond what was known at that time and pushing the limits.
The most striking development is a revolutionary low-priced home designed by Buckminster Fuller for mass production. With their present potential, The nation's aircraft plants could turn these out at the rate of 2 million a year.
So, Mr. Fuller, why a roundhouse?
Why not? The only reason houses have been rectangular all these years is that that is all to do with the materials we had. Now, with modern materials and technology, we can apply to houses the same efficiency of engineering that we apply to suspension bridges and airplanes.
Sometimes you see Fuller as a kind of fountainhead figure. He might have been a genius invented by Ayn Rand, pitched against a cruel, misunderstanding world. And of course, the conventional world of study and scholarship hates self-taught geniuses, hates people that you can't categorize, hates people who try to be both rocket scientists, architects, inventors, but they can't dismiss him either.
Bucky's dropping off the map a couple of years after his death perplexed me for a long time. He had been so much a cultural hero to several generations of students, and his work was out there. His books were published, and a lot of influential people, particularly in the architectural profession, were very impressed and influenced by his work.
Inventor, architect, sailor, poet, physicist, mathematician, author, and natural philosopher. R. Buckminster Fuller, known as Bucky the world over, has dedicated his life's work to the understanding of universal principles in natural forces, and the application of those principles in designing inventions that he calls artifacts.
Bucky was, in many ways, misunderstood, underrated, underappreciated. I think his messages are perhaps more appropriate now than ever in our history.
I hear a lot of people say, I don't like machinery and technology, it's making a lot of trouble, upset all the old things. So we're going to take all the machinery away from all the countries in the world, all machinery. All the tracks and the wires and the works, we're going to dump it all in the ocean. And you'll discover that within 6 months, 2 billion people will die of starvation, having gone through great pain on the way. So you say, that's not a very good idea, let's put the machinery back where it was. Then, we're going to take all the politicians from all the countries around the world, and we're going to send them a trip around the sun. And you find we keep right on eating. And with the political barriers down, you'll have what the scientists have said is necessary. The scientists say very clear, you could make the world work and take care of 100% of humanity, the highest standard of living than anybody has ever known, despite an increasing population, but you can't do it with the barriers, any more than you can try to run the human organism with a wall between the ear and the eye and the stomach.
Buckminster Fuller's always had a preoccupation with the world. You know, he wasn't focused in on a specific client as an architect, you know, an individual family or a corporation. He was always interested in the planet and its problems. So when he dealt with housing, it was how do you house humanity, not how do you house this corporation or the new Walmart store or this wealthy family.
Some people try and present Buckminster Fuller as if he was a classic modern architect. In fact, that's absolutely wrong. He despised the Bauhaus. He said the Bauhaus, all they cared about was what the taps looked like. What Fuller wanted to know was where was the water that went through the taps coming from, and how would you produce that water cheaply, efficiently?
He looked at the problem from a holistic point of view. The Bauhaus was looking at it from the building point of view, and that's what bothered him about, you know, the Bauhaus. He had great friendship with Walter Gropius, but the point is that it was just a different way. And so that's why, you know, in some of the film interviews, you've probably seen Philip Johnson. Well, Bucky was not an architect. Well, Bucky didn't want to be an architect.
In 1927, I decided man was operating on the most fundamental fallacy. He was operating on the basis that man was supposed to be a failure, and therefore he had to prove his right to live. And each man then thought he had to say, I can show how I can earn my living. The other people are supposed to die. I decided the fallacy was that man, as designed, was designed to be an extraordinary success. His characteristics were just magnificent. And what would be necessary would really be to find out what were the great comprehensive patterns operating in the universe, how then the metaphysical man as mind could become the master of the physical. So I then said, I think my first grand strategy of finding out how to use the world's resources so they will take care of everybody, but come back then to how to take care of his living equipment. This brought me then to what I call the Dymaxion Tower House, the 4D Tower House.
His experience in the Navy in World War I was a very powerful experience because they were forced to think in very much bigger patterns than most of us are.
He had served in the Navy, and there was a sense about his work of achieving the best possible performance in adverse conditions. Dimaxion was one of those many words that he made up, which was to do with maximum performance for least effort.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a first and very crude paper model of a house designed for industrial reproduction. Its requirements must be that it should be proof against fire, flood, tornado, earthquake, electrical storms, marauders.
One of the recurring dreams of architects in the 20th century was the sense that why can't we build houses with the same speed, efficiency, lightness of a car production line? Architects have kept saying we're stuck in this kind of 2,000-year-old technology of heaviness, of stone, of mud. And Fuller was one of the people who tried to turn this dream, this fantasy, into a real product.
And as a result, in 1932, he was not exhibited in the Museum of Modern Art exhibition on modern architecture. Why he was not exhibited? Why the Dymaxion House of 28 is not exhibited? Because precisely it was modern. The modern architects hated something that was actually modern.
It was not a kind of gizmo, a sort of technological fantasy. I mean, this was very much about the ecology and the poetry of the lifestyle within a building.
At Wichita, Kansas, in the very center of the United States, the housing problem brings out a circular dwelling built of aluminum and plastics. Instead of a foundation, this cornerless cottage is suspended from a central mast of stainless steel. The engineering principle, with the safety factor of a suspension bridge, permits new ideas like a revolving roof. The clothes closet appears...
There are many threads which weave around Bucky. The science fiction thread, if you like, in the early part of his career, the golden, streamlined age.
A roundhouse may seem strange, but in a housing shortage, people are giving attention to all new ideas.
The house also, in its perhaps its most enigmatic form, came out of the technology that had produced in wartime the bomber which dropped the atomic bomb. So I think Bucky was aware of the forces for, if you like, evil, destruction, and the idea that those could be harnessed for good, for livingry, as he would put it, rather than weaponry.
Fuller could not stop inventing. He'd done a house, so the next thing is to think about doing a car.
Here's the Ford Auto with only 3 wheels. Watch your step. "19 feet long, but look at it do ring around a Rosie with this car. Great stuff if he tries to hand out a ticket. Get him busy and say goodbye."
He made 3 prototypes. And the most sort of disastrous one was in Chicago. He brought one to the Chicago World's Fair. And it was a professional driver who was there to demonstrate. And the car was involved in an accident in which the driver was killed. Bucky always said that what had happened was that the car had been going through an intersection early in the morning, and it had been hit head-on by another car coming from a side street. Bucky's story was that the other car belonged to a city government official in Chicago, and that the car was spirited away from the scene of the accident. And by the time the newspaper reporters got there was no other car or any evidence of another car being involved. And so the headline the next morning was, "Freak car overturns, kills driver," as though this had happened because of some malfunction of the car. This, more than anything else, destroyed the possibility of developing the car commercially.
Fuller has often been accused of being like 50 years ahead of his time. He saw the trends of the world, the industrialization of the world, the telecommunications, that it was bringing the world together, that we were getting smaller and smaller. He sort of categorized the planet as a ship, you know, Spaceship Earth, and which was a wonderful and powerful metaphor, Fuller being, among other things, a wonderful poet. But this metaphor of Spaceship Earth made you all realize we're on one ship and we're all together on this, and a leak in the starboard side is gonna knock everybody. It's gonna sink the whole ship, not just that part of it. The maps that were in existence when Fuller was a young man were horribly distorted. Not only were things missing, like an entire continent, Antarctica, but other things were so enlarged, you know, like Greenland, Iceland were gigantic. They were the size of South America. So Fuller thought, okay, if we're going to try to approach problem solving from a planetary perspective, we need a frame of reference, a tool that will at least allow us to see the world without this gross distortion. Because if you start off with this distorted world, your solutions could be seriously distorted as well. So he created a map using his geometry. He figured out a way of taking information off of a sphere. It was a major discovery of figuring out how do you get information off of a sphere onto a flat piece of paper without distorting it.
When you've been dreaming at night and you wake and you transfer those dreams into a notebook and you think you found the secret of everything, and then you wake up in the morning and found that you put down gibberish. Is that what Fuller is? Some of those notebooks give that troubling sensation of a man who's trying to make sense of a senseless world. And yet in those strange, ugly, crude drawings, you also find the traces of someone who has really understood the nature of geometry of the universe.
I think that he really believed that he had succeeded in understanding the universe. And he said it came entirely through his mathematics. He did develop a new form of mathematics that used different principles from Euclidean mathematics. And he said this was the basis of all of his understandings.
He felt that nature and its phenomena could be modeled, that abstract theoretical mathematical concepts were not the correct way to try to interpret nature. And so his energetic synergetic geometry was not just fooling around with geometric pretty shapes. It's an experiment that had consequences.
Physicists and chemists have said that his model, which became the Geodesic Dome, can be seen as the basic structural form of the protein shell that is essential to any natural form. And so he's had validation of a recognizable kind for some of his discoveries.
And out of the mechanical competence initiated in the power-borne airship comes the birth of our ability to convert our resources to serve not 30% of the population, but the whole of humanity. This is a Geodesic Dome designed for the United States Marine Corps, and now in mass production and to be produced for $1,800.
I think that Fuller was himself probably an alien, right? I mean, do we have any real evidence that he was an ordinary human? Right? What would the evidence be? He didn't think in such a simple way, seemed to be thinking far ahead of his time, still ahead of today's time. For him, the universe was all about radiation. The universe is something to tune into. It's not a thing, it's not an object. He didn't really believe in objects. I think the people who really misunderstand Fuller, you look at the objects, even the structural systems, say, ah, that's Fuller. For Fuller, no, he was interested in the way the universe is radiating ideas.
His basic attitude, I think, was that if people could understand, if they could have explained to them how things really worked, they would choose the best course. They would act rationally. And I came to feel that this was his main flaw. He didn't allow for the irrational aspect of human behavior. He couldn't possibly have foreseen a time like this one where opinion triumphs over fact again and again and again. That just would have been unthinkable to him.
You don't try to change humanity, you change the environment. Because you're not going to change the human nature, but you can change the environment, which will then affect how humans behave. And that's what he wanted to do.
Bucky had this extraordinary awareness of being on a huge sphere, a planet, which was rolling on its axis and traveling through space. And Bucky wrote a poem where he exhorts the reader to feel with him the power of this rolling sphere.
Simply, we're evolving really quite rapidly now.
Then you feel this enormous Earth revolving here on the polar axis. I want all of you to look at it with me now. Look at that thing and feel this great horizon. The sun is not doing a thing. We are really rolling. You see, this is absolute reality. Boy, she's really moving quite rapidly now. You feel it. The wider apart your legs, the more you feel it. Now we're really going around. Boy, it's wonderful to really feel this enormous big sphere we're on. I've traveled enough to know I feel it really powerfully.
That's it from my side.
Wonderful. I think we should give I was just absolutely engrossed. A big hand to this. Amazing. It's just not amazing. It's a revelation. It's a revelation of a genius who's just not a person, but I think I don't want to make a long speech after all this beautiful presentation. A revelation of a person who was able to approach the mysteries of existence, mysteries of human evolution, and its relationship with the cosmos. And that relationship is the divine. It's not that the divine is somewhere up there and we are here. The creator and the creation itself are one. And I'd just like to emphasize 2, 3, 4, 5 points, which I made some notes and like a class 1 student. And I think the first one is because we had a presentation on the Bauhaus.
Yes.
So Fuller was essentially a Bauhaus person, but Bauhaus was just 30% of what Fuller was. There was an extra 70% where Fuller went beyond just a building function and form, and he took the bits and pieces of natural flows which are not linear, but they're curvilinear, which are not a movement from point A to B, but it's a movement from point A to A dash, A dash dash, A dash dash. And by the time you reach B, which is a dash 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 dash, probably it's not a line. It's in the same way if you walk along a long, long field going up to a hill, and when you reach the top of the hill, you may not be able to see the point from where you have started because it has gone beyond the horizon. So though we think we have made a long linear journey, but it's not. In our small scale, it's a line, but in the largest scales of perceptions and everything, it's actually a curve. So everything in this universe, everything in this cosmos is a curve. When you throw a pack of energy in the space, the final shape that the energy takes is a sphere, So that is fundamental. You know, it's like the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, the galaxies, and everyone is rotating around its axis. And everything is going around another huge system like the sun. The sun is also rotating with hundreds of others, hundreds and thousands of other suns in the galaxy around a central point, which is called the pole star or the galactic north. Yeah, that's a very fantastic thing. The Earth's axis takes about 26,000 years to come back to its own position. So we have different sky domes. This is an area which is called archaeoastronomy. So Fuller, these are things which we are just recognizing today. I mean, the science of archaeoastronomy, which has helped Indian history to come out in a beautiful way. For example, there's a little description in the Rig Veda which talks about a certain star, Hamal, which is a part of Aries, coming up at dawn. So if you want to see that at dawn, you cannot see it right now because it's in some other position. So when you put that to your computer, the computer predicts 8,245 BCE. That means that man who had actually coded that sky dome view in that line of Rig Veda is from that age 10,254 years back. That talks about, so this is not magic, this is not superstition, this is not just a conjecture, this is computer computing for you the positions of the sky dome. So this is what Fuller was talking about 60, 70 years back. So this brings us to many other people like him, like Carl Sagan, his famous book Cosmos, and many other people. So the third and the most important thing is, second was Cosmos. The third and the most important thing is the technology that he used. And today we are talking about green energy. We are trying to put trees inside our building or on the rooftop. J. is trying to do a thesis on energy conservation and comfort systems. We are trying to develop surfaces of habitable spaces, and we are trying to become non-Euclidean, non-Newtonian, non-Cartesian. So these takes us to non-linear dynamic systems, like the formation of a wire mesh. So if you extend the wire mesh, it's no more a plane, it's a curvilinear, it's a shape, it's a shell. It's probably the shell of a small shell under the sea, or it's a part of the planet. So I don't want to be very complicated today. So in other way, in one line, he recognized some of the universal grammars of the cosmos, which is there in the macrocosm, in the suns and the galaxies, and which is also there in the microcosm, which composes our proteins, the ribonucleic acids, the RNAs, the deribonucleic acids, the DNAs, and our entire genetic code. That's why Norman Foster is saying, and he was talking in a language which was about 100 years ahead of his times. It's just today, after Ilya Prigogine, 1977 got the Nobel Prize in chemistry, nuclear chemistry. We discovered that most of chemical shapes are not linear. They're all curvilinear. They're complex structures, they're dissipative structures, they're systemic structures, they're fractalized structures. By fractals, what you mean is that a small unit gets repeated at any level of truth. Like you have a seed inside a fruit, but the fruit is there in a branch, the branch is there in a tree, but the whole tree is again inside another seed, which is there in the other tree, the tree before and the tree after. So trees are connected to seeds and the seeds are connected to trees. So if you map that in time scale, seeds go to trees, trees come back to seeds. So this is not linear, this is cyclic. This is absolutely cyclic. So cycles are the foundations of world science, cosmic science, global science. And this is not exponential growth. This is what you call allomeric growth, allo, A-L-L-O-M-E-R-I-C, Smeed's model, we do that in urban planning. So I think there's a whole discussion. We can have a 1 month workshop with J. and Shivam on Fuller, and we won't be able to exhaust all this discussion. But today's presentation, this wonderful, brilliant presentation for you and for me also, because I learned a few things today, and my bad habit is that I again get excited about another new thing, and is that Fuller makes you young. I mean, youth is always a property of the mind. It has got nothing to do with body, So you're always young. So that's why you are born again. It's like the Tintin comics where that man Red Rackham shouts at Captain Haddock saying, "In another life, in another time, I'll again come back to you to take that ship of unicorn and all the wealth." So if you look at the only Tintin movie, it's right there in that movie, which talks about time in cycles. So he's talking about another life, another time, another opportunity to come back. So that's the law of causation. Nothing can just stop like this, and it's not linear. So his technology is for climate, for ecology, for all energy solutions, for greening, greenfield developments. I think these are big terms for you at this stage of first year basic design. But what I want to say is that he's one of the fathers of what we call systems engineering and systems architecture. So I think I'll request all of you in this class, in your free time, in your summertime, to look at what is systems architecture. By architecture is just not making buildings, but the whole nature is a systems architecture. Systems thinking, like the car, there is a portion which is distributor. So if you keep a distributor on the table, it functions only as a distributor. And if you keep a tire on another table, it only functions as a tire. And if you keep a wheel in the third table, it only functions as a wheel. But if you put a distributor with a tire, with a wheel, with an electrical circuit, it becomes a car. So the car becomes a system of all its parts. But the car is more than the sum of its parts. The car is more than the sum of its parts. This is nonlinear mathematics. It's got an extra function which cannot be just achieved by adding the parts, which also cannot be achieved by multiplying the parts. It can be only achieved if you understand the life complexities and the cyclic energies of the parts, and if you bring them together, you make a whole. So Fuller is essentially a holistic architect. He talked about the whole, by whole, WHO whole. So there are wonderful terms like holarchy, which is not a hierarchy. In hierarchy, we have levels which are separate, but in holarchy, it's all together. So these are concepts which can be only clear to me, to you, to Jesludi, to Shivangidi, provided we live our life with them. These are not things you pick up something in a classroom and you go back and you forget. The next day you're into something. You look at the life of Fuller. He was absolutely immersed. He was inside a pond, inside a sea of knowledge, inside an ocean of thousands of waves of idea. But to him, more than the waves, that one ocean, the cosmic ocean, was the most important thing to be understood. So today I'm very, very thankful to Jeslu for bringing this opportunity. We have not done this before. We have not discussed Fuller before. So I think this is they're a wonderful batch of people, Jeslu. This 35, 36, 40 students. I still don't know what is the final number. So yeah. So anyway. But the thing is, because in different times we have 33 people, we have 38 people, we have 36 people. So I look at that number rather than the number which is there written there in that static roll list. Because the everyday's number is, yeah, so it's 39, sir. Prerana is so nice to tell me. So it's like 39 plus 3 of us, it's about 42. So 42 of us makes an ensemble. Ensemble is a very important word. So when Fuller is designing the spaceships, which is a Dymaxion, by looking at another spaceship, which is the Earth, which moves around another spaceship, which is the Sun, which moves around thousands of spaceships around a center, which is the galaxy, the Milky Way, which moves with other galaxies like Andromeda and others around an invisible center, on which Einstein and Niels Bohr argued. Einstein said there's no such center. Bohr said there is. And that's where Einstein fell short of Bohr. Both were Nobel laureates, wonderful scientists, and that is the birth of quantum physics. It all started with Niels Bohr. And then came those brilliant minds like Werner Heisenberg, Erwin Schrödinger, times of Richard Feynman, one of the disciples of Albert Einstein, and then Ilya Prigogine, Geoffrey Chew, David Bohm, who is a disciple of Enrico Fermi, another Nobel laureate. So we need to know all this because they're also dealing with structures. We are also dealing with structures. They are dealing with structures of the universe, and we are dealing with structures of built environment. And most of us say, is there a connection? It's irrelevant. It's insignificant. Why are we discussing all these things? Fuller said there is a connection. Not only there is a connection, it's a deep connection. Not only it's a deep connection, it's the deepest connection. And that deepest connection is the divine, God himself. There's no other definition of God inside a temple or a church. It is a life divine, in the words of Sri Aurobindo. He is living everything in the universe. So if you understand that, you also become a God-like person, like Gandhiji or Vivekananda or Christ. So you understand the structures of the universe. You know how to make a less encouraged people more encouraged. You know how to put life and laughter on his face. You know how to increase the energy efficiency of a building system. You know to design systems which will make the poor people richer. You make things which are more affordable. So you are doing God-like things in the universe. So you become the sons of God. If you are doing God-like thing, you are the son of God because you are doing things which God expects of you. So Fuller is Fuller is absolutely a fantasy of architecture, and he's a fantasy who should not be kept up there in a cupboard in the top shelf. He's a fantasy which should be downloaded right in our own life. And I think today's presentation, I think I'll stop here. It's almost like 1 hour of solid state physics, semiconductors. So this was fantastic. And Jeslu, you gave us the opportunity, you gave me the opportunity to share this kind of dissipated, disorganized, bubblish kind of words with some of my best friends. And I know, Shivangi knows they're very intelligent and they will understand more than what we have understood in our preceding times and ages. So this is something which is so important for this. So Jetslu, what I want is that can you cut this portion of Buckminster Fuller with this little gibberish talk of mine in the end? And yes. We want to keep this as a YouTube. And I think if we have some more questions and answers after this from our wonderful class, we can include that also. So with this, I give it to the class to raise some questions and ask some teasers. And Jesluti can always answer. Why? Because she is inspired. And her presentation was a token of inspiration. I mean, she did not do a 5 minutes presentation. She gave her time and energy for the whole presentation. So that's called love. So when love comes in with work, which is karma, love is yoga. Karma becomes karma yoga, karma yoga. So love is yoga and karma is action. So in Jesluti's presentation, we saw the coming together of love and action, karma and yoga. So it has become karma yoga. So it is absolutely beautiful and it is so inspiring. So over to the platform, the honorable first years to ask some questions. I'm sure Kaloni has a question, Anuj has a question, Vedant has a question. I think Syed had a question or something like that. Let's have some questions. Open. Thank you. I hope I have made some sense. I hope I have made some sense. Yes. Okay, yes. One more round to Jesludi. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, some questions here.
Jesludi, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I didn't understand the idea of Dimaxion Map.
Okay, so in the normal map, what we have, the 2D map that we have, it's not a proper projection of the whole globe that we have or the Earth whatever the size of the continents or the proportion in which the aspect ratio in which the actual continents are, that is not exactly translated onto a normal 2D map. So if you see, especially in the poles, top and bottom, there's a lot of distortion because of that spherical shape. So, and this is what we normally use, that distorted map. So, but Fuller wanted to create a map in such a way that there is no distortion in any of the continents or whatever is there on sphere. Like, so he understood that Earth is a sphere, and whatever was there on that sphere, he wanted it to translate properly onto the map so that he knows what is the exact proportion in which each continent is, each surface is, etc. So he found a geometrical method for this translation. So he used those triangles and he made a polygon out of it using those triangles so that it can be translated without any distortions. And that's used even this map that's used even now in order to create realistic prototypes of the Earth, etc. So there's one more person whom I read about, I'm forgetting the name. So what he did was he took satellite images of the actual Earth. So he collected satellite images over a lot of years, and he used that, and he used Fuller's projections and made a proper realistic model of the Earth. So it really looks like what we looks like the Earth that we see from the outer space. So such kind of research is also happening right now. But basically the use is that it gives us a more realistic idea of how the continents are, what is the area.
Yeah, I can just add a small thing. The person who actually started doing all this, especially in the media, was George Lucas. Yeah, George Lucas. He actually was a very young person when the first space movie was made by the British studios. That's called 2001: Space Odyssey. I think a time when you are not born. I mean, I was born, of course. Jeslu was just born. So this was a movie in the late 80s, I think so, if I'm right. And then George Lucas became more adult and he went to MIT. He started garnering the MIT lab, and that was a more advent of computer systems. So, and that is the beginning of wire mesh, 3D Max, three-dimensional maximum efficiency productions of softwares. And that is how Star Wars were made by Star Wars 1, Star Wars 2. So they were the first movies in the human civilization, as we know right now, which started using computers and computer graphics based on curvilinear warps, 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 which are webs. So WEB is web, WAV is wave, and WEP is web. So they all mean movements in surfaces. So much of Fuller's notebooks, field notes, drawings were actually taken up by the MIT lab, and then now it's a worldwide thing. And today you don't have to actually go out into a studio to make a movie. You can be inside a studio and you can do anything that you wish. Like you can go to Jupiter and go to the next galaxy. You can show Star Wars. You can just convert a robot into a car back to a robot. So all those telematics of informations and imageries are possible with the latest softwares. But everybody of us, including George Lucas, owes a lot of gratitude to Buckminster Fuller. Yeah. So the Dymaxion is a house. I think Jesli already said it. I mean, normally we do a house and we think that the user will go and adapt to the house. On the contrary, the Dymaxion adapts to the lifestyle and the livability of the user itself. Thinking in the same way we have adapted to the planet, and the planet has adapted to us. In the same way, the house will adapt to us and will likewise adapt to the planet. So I think there was another talk by another expert, the relationship between design and environment. Which affects first? Do you design an environment? The environment changes and then you change, or do you change yourself first and design the environment? And the environment again changes and that changes. So the two-way dialogue between design and environment is as old as design itself. So these are serious questions which we normally don't ask, but someone like Fuller kept on asking that question throughout his life. Yeah. Sorry, just I mean I'm just barging in. Yeah, yeah.
No, sir, that was a very good point. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the little that I know, there is the hundreds of other things which are beyond this. Yeah. Second question.
Hello.
Hello, Spandan.
So my question was, can you please elaborate more on the geodesic dome, like how it mixed the surrounding environment with the inner one, and also its applications in the normal life, as it was low-cost housing. So was there any practical application of it in the lives of normal people? Was any plan such sanctioned, and how?
Yes, so you saw, so for I'll start from behind. So for the low cost housing, so we saw how, so this is just one dome and you don't need, he minimized the structural members that you need in order to span that much of area. So if it is a large dome or even if it's a small shelter, you don't need, so he basically merged the roof and the walls. It's just one structural member, one shell which covers, and you saw how easily it can be transported. So that was one way how he improve the living condition of migrant workers, construction workers, and temporary sheds. So other temporary sheds which were not in a very hygienic conditions, etc., like poor roofs and poor walls. This is one structure which can be easily transported, and because it is these tension members, it is more stable and more robust, and it stays for a longer time. So you can shift it back to another location very easily. So that is one low cost method how the geodesic dome was used in. And the other one, the big one, the big geodesic dome which you saw. So this is a very very much of implication in present world, because in most of the large auditoriums or large spaces where you want to span a long space and create column free structures where you don't want intrusions or columns inside, these geodesic dome principles are used. The same arching or the same shell form is still used, and there are so many buildings which have been inspired from this. I can think about the Matri Mandir in Oroville. So that is one very good example of a geodesic dome, and it has that. It's a huge structure, and inside we see that it's complete. Like we get the entire inside space without any columns, and so the highlight of Matri Mandir is that because of that column free space, one ray of light is allowed to fall onto a globe which is kept inside. So that is enhanced. If we had a lot of structural members in between, we cannot do that. So that is a manifestation of Sri Aurobindo's principles, how they wanted the divine light to come in. So all these were again inspired from this geodesic dome which Fuller proposed. And there are so many. So in fact, the research says that more than 30 lakh geodesic domes have been built so far. So it's still, so even in normal kids playgrounds, we might see a small geodesic dome, which is very common today, but it was not so common at that time, or not even. He invented it, and then it started gaining popularity, and right now it's so common that we feel that it has always been there, but it was not. Sir, I think you're muted.
Building, can you see that image? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Norman Foster, isn't it?
Yeah, Norman Foster. So this is an extension of Buckminster Fuller. I mean, if Fuller was doing this 70 years back, we would have called him crazy. But Norman Foster did it 70 years later, and today is one of the. So that's why Foster is one of the greatest architects. You can call him like the godson of Buckminster Fuller. I mean, who has taken Fuller ahead. Yeah, taken Fuller ahead. And that wonderful example, which was our lifetime. You know, I've seen that building coming up because I was in Pondicherry in 1981 trying to do a work, and that got us the Louis Kahn Trophy at NASA. The second prize. So we did a walk, and that time the Matri Mandir was just coming up, and it was built like this. This part was not built. So we had spent about 15 days in Oroville, you know. Yeah, and it was the Bharat Bhavan building was the only building which was completed, and we are there in Pondicherry for about 15 days. This is my second year. This is my second year. So that time. I saw Fuller coming up, and now Shivangi has something to say. Shivangi, yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, after this presentation, I just reminded of one of the structure in Changi Airport. Like they have beautifully used this Buckminster Fuller roof in the.
Yes.
I think
Can you?
I have shared. I
Yeah,
have
can you just
shared.
paste that image?
Yes, sir. I was just trying to do that only. Just a second.
Please do it. Take your time. Take your time. Yeah, I got the image here. You can also paste. I can also paste.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. So this is the structure that has been designed by the Safdai architects in the Changi airport, and how the actual the whole new ecosystem has been created inside the structure, and that was amazing. So like none of the structure can be used for. Yes, yeah, the same one.
The same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been inside. Yeah, that's so I've been inside the structure. I've seen it. You know.
Yes, sir, and that is amazing.
Amazing. So
Even I have seen this. It's
yeah, you have
nice.
seen this. I and Akhidi, I mean Professor Akhi Banerjee of Ranveer Chitragupta School. She was running, running all over this place. You know, she was absolutely
Yes,
excited.
sir. And without any obstruction, how this whole structure has been created? Like this is only possible by the Buckminster Fuller geodesic domes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, this is very interesting because I don't know how, it was a coincidence. In 1981, I was first. That was my first international trip to Singapore. 1981, 1980. I'm sorry, 1980. That time Changi Airport was coming up, and then again in 2011. So that's about 30 years later. I was again in Changi Airport complete, and Akhidi was running like a little kid all over the place. So this was absolute, and it gave me, you know, goose pimples and absolute excitement, you know, absolutely brilliant. So you can see Buckminster Fuller all over the world right now, all over the world right now. And this is actually a little reminiscence of, we're almost entering history of architecture today. You know, I think that's, what's his name? The Crystal Palace at London, designed by John Paxton, or
yes, sir.
John Paxton. Yeah, Paxton. Yeah, yes, you can check the name. So some John had designed the Crystal Palace. So I mean, he is like the proto Bucky Fuller, pro Bucky Fuller. So he designed the Crystal Palace, and it inspired the father of Rabindranath Tagore to design the Crystal Palace worship center at Shantiniketan, which is called the Prarthana Griha. You know, yeah. So this is the Crystal Palace. So
Yes,
I
John Paxton.
John Paxton. Yeah, John Paxton. Yeah, so John Paxton. So I'll you continue, Shivangi. I'll use that the other, yeah.
Sir, I think that this Crystal Palace was one of the first the steel building.
The first steel building.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, you carry on. I'll just take a copy of this.
And the Jeslu was saying that in the there could be the possibility of making the very low cost and easy to build building for the migrants and other in some kind of very emergency situations. So the whole material can be transported from other place to that place, and from there the assembling can be done very easily and in much lesser of the time. So I think this is one of the benefits of this Buckminster Fuller. And in our architecture department also we have some small Buckminster Fuller structure, no, in behind
one
of
dome
the,
they have.
yeah, one dome. I think second year or first year students has developed that dome a few years back.
So this last picture is in Shantiniketan. I mean, Shivangi, I, and some of us, we have seen it a number of times. So this is a Crystal Palace at Shantiniketan, which was designed by Maharshi Devendranath Tagore, in line with the inspirations of what John Paxton did in London. Yeah. So the inspirations are world over, So today, Buckminster Fuller is almost like, it's like he's like the Buddha or the Christ of architecture. Yeah. So
Yeah, and Spandan, about the element also. So they even discovered a new element based on Buckminster Fuller's geodesic dome geometry. So they used their geometry to uh, join these elements and then checked, and they led to an invention of a new element also. So that was definitely a lot of inspiration. So as Sir was saying, as an element also, it's there around us everywhere.
yeah. And then finally
Yeah,
you find it in the beehive. That's the most important thing. The entire beehive is actually a geodesic dome. It's an unformatted geodesic dome. It's not a perfect spheres because bees are not that calculating like us, that they'll go with a computer and a software. So they're just doing it naturally. So the final beehive form is a geodesic dome. The final beehive form is a geodesic dome. And it's one of the it's actually called, in ecosystem architecture, it's actually called a swarm architecture, swarm architecture, where thousands of bees orchestrate with each other with a common design intelligence to convert the nectar of the flower into honey, which is immortal. So to do that, they follow natural rules and they make a moon-like structure. So whenever there's a moonlit night, the bees go mad. Because they think that the sun was there, which looked of one type, and in the night there is a sun of another color. So they go mad. So the bees in the daytime are of one type, the bees in the nighttime are of another type. Now these similes has been used in religion also. Like the Vedas focus more on the daytime. And Islam focus more on the night time. So in the Quran, there are some parables of a nighttime bee, which is trying to store nectar and convert it to a honey, which is compared to the nectar of immortality, surah, nectar of immortality of Allah or God, whatever you call it. So these are fantastic ideas and constructs and semantics which runs through the entire human civilization. I mean, we can go on and on and on, but I think we should take one or two more questions. Excellent discussion today. I'm enjoying. I don't know whether others are enjoying or not.
So is the name Crystal Palace, like, I didn't get when the meditation Crystal Palace, the one which you shared.
Which one, Shantiniketan or in London?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, Shantiniketan, it's known as Prarthana Griha. I just wrote it. Prarthana means meditation or prayers.
Yes, sir. So Crystal Palace, like, what is that? How is it related?
Yeah, Crystal Palace is the original structure built by John Paxton.
John Paxton. Right.
Yeah. That is in London.
Okay. And I had a doubt regarding the car, the based on which basic prototype.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Were there different prototypes? Like they mentioned something that there was a three-wheeler. That was the main function or main feature. Sorry, the main feature. And apart from that, was it the same prototype which he suggested that it can be used on land, water, and in the air simultaneously?
No,
or that's a different prototype?
Different. So basically, he started designing a vehicle which can be used in land, water, and sea. So he designed it using those air-jet materials, etc. But he did not have those materials. So finally, the prototype or whatever he made was a normal car with three wheels. So the advantage was that it can take deep turns and it was low cost. So that's what he developed. But even that, he could not sell it in the market. So leave alone the other things which he wanted, he could not do it.
But he had designed a basic model of the one that we used in all three places, land, water.
Yes. He had the sketches, he had the materials, he had everything noted down in his book. So he had all that in place. he couldn't make it physically, but he had all the designs. Sir, I think you're muted.
If you look at the picture of posted by Shivangidi, so this is the original Crystal Palace, which was designed in London. So I don't want to tell my story. So in 1992, when I was in Toronto, I went to a shopping center which was known as the Eaton Center. Eaton is one of the largest shopping mall chains. It was in North America in the 80s and the 90s. So let me see if I can get that picture. You'll be so surprised that it almost looks the same. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, you carry on, just look. Yeah.
Yes. Anybody, any more observations?
Jeslu, yesterday I was just seeing a video, and which is I don't know about the company that has created one prototype that is very similar to the Buckminster Fuller, and that is having the that can fly, that is having the chopper kind of thing that used to get into something somehow, that used to just minimizes to some smaller thing, and that can also flow in water. So that company had got patent somewhere, and that looks somewhat like this that you have shown us.
Okay.
So Colony, here you can see the Toronto's Eaton Center. I used to go to this shopping mall almost every third day. It was very close to my working place where I took my training. Yeah, and you compare this picture to the John Paxton's Crystal Palace Center.
Very similar.
Very similar. So over 200 years, nothing has changed.
Yes,
so they use the same principles which Bucky Fuller, the curvilinear. But Fuller was even more romantic. I mean, he was just. I mean, he won't allow a line going straight. He'll make everything spherical.
But I think, sir, what was more important about Fuller is that he thought of all this at his time, like when nothing of it existed.
Yeah. That you have. So to Colony, you have to think ahead of your time and do things which will be applied, which will be applicable in 2070 or 80. So start thinking in those lines. Yeah.
Yes,
Don't go with the mob. Don't go with the mob. Go ahead. Go ahead of your times. Contribute to the world. Give something to humanity. Make youngsters inspired. That's very important. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? I think there was a lost question which Syed had asked. Is this the rain getting collected on curved part of roof to center and falling in Changi Airport?
I think that is artificial waterfall.
Yeah, that is artificial water. The entire Changi Airport is actually not an airport. It's called it's an erythropolis. Yeah, where the airport is an extension of the city and the city extends to the airport. So without getting your visa stamped, you can be inside Changi Airport and do a meeting with people in Singapore who can come to Changi Airport. You can stay there for 7 days inside the airport, have your lunch and dinner inside the airport, make your children's play inside the airport, sit down in a lounge, play on the piano inside the airport, sleep and have fun inside the airport, and then on the 8th day you catch a flight and leave Singapore from inside the airport. That is called an erythropolis. That's Changi.
Yes. No, to answer Syed's question, if my memory is right, if we stand on top, like we can see that water coming down also. Like there are 2 levels. So in one level, we can see the water spiraling, and then in the ground floor level, we can see this water falling. So it's both the ways.
Yeah, and Changi Airport also has a huge circuit of water harvesting. So there is a portion of water which is coming from outside, which is also pulled inside the airport, and that's churned and it's recycled. So the outside is inside and the inside is outside. That's water harvesting and water recycling. Yeah. The Changi Airport is actually a great design. And today airports are increasingly being designed that way. They're trying to redesign Narita. Narita was designed about 35 years back as world's largest airport on a claimed land from the sea. Now, most of Narita is not there on the mainland. So I've seen that airport a couple of times. But today you cannot feel it. It's a part of Tokyo, mainland. It's a part of Tokyo. But that land did not exist, you know. In fact, 1/3 of Singapore did not exist when I had gone to Singapore in 1981. So they have reclaimed one side of Singapore. It's called the Faber Hill, Faber Hill. So that is where the American naval base and everything is there. And and it's basically a military cantonment. So it's all reclamation. So I think some of those questions which Shahid is always asking has some of those engineering. So you need engineering answers, not architectural answers for that. You know, more specific, more precise, and more design solution oriented. You know. Yeah, good, lovely. Any other one or two other questions? Then we can have a quick revisiting of the design submission next Wednesday. The class is from 6:30 to 8:30 or 9. So we can spend around half an hour today or 45 minutes, and then we leave. At least I have to leave because I have a bunch of things after this. And I didn't want to start that solid PowerPoint today. So Jesli, what you can discuss, I think not today. Next class, we should start discussing about solids and making cubes, making of cubes. Yes. So I think very quickly, this class is beautiful. So we should enter the world of 3 dimension, you know, and start creating. So I think we should have 2-3 assignments with cubes, you know, decomposition, deconstruction, interpenetrations, you know, and I think they'll enjoy it tremendously. You know, maybe a solid cube with a transparent cube, you know, something like, yeah. So you can think of 1 or 2 design, not problems, but design topics ahead of us. The next one and the next one. I give it to you. I can do it, but I think you and Shivangi can discuss, and you can frame the next 2 design problems with cubes on the principles of interpenetration, juxtaposition, deconstruction, big and small, small to big, cumulative additions or cumulative subtractions, you know. So I think that will be very, very, very interesting. And so also do a little bit of volumetric calculations and mathematics. But I should not discuss all that today. So any 1 or 2 more questions, class? Priyanshu, Spandan, anyone else? Anyone else? Or else, I think we are so excited, we don't want to discuss our design after this. Yeah, this is marvelous. This is design. This is actually design. This is actually design.
Sir, I wanted to ask one question. Have you been inside the Prarthana Graha?
Yeah, I've been there once.
So how is the feeling of that tinted glass?
Yeah, it is absolutely lovely. Yeah, it's absolutely lovely. It has the same feeling of a Gothic cathedral, mostly in France and Lombardy and Lower Germany. So Maharshi Debendranath Thakur, father of Rabindranath, was highly inspired by these movements. And I think, you know, the Tagore family was very international, you know, very international. And one of his brother's son, Gaganendranath and Abanendranath, they invited Paul Klee and Kandinsky's students to Kolkata, 1926 to 28. So Bauhaus came to Kolkata for an exhibition. Yeah, nobody knew about Bauhaus in 1926 and 98. I mean, but Tagore's family knew that. They're very advanced, much ahead. So they were like the Buckminster Fullers of India in 1920s, the 1910s and the 1920s. And that is how Tagore became the friend of H.G. Wells, you know, the time machine. You know. Tagore became the friend of Rothenstein. Tagore became a friend of Roma Lola, the Nobel laureate, you know, and so many other people, C.F. Andrews, Patrick Geddes. So coming back to the Crystal Palace, Maharshi Debendranath Tagore's father, Prince Dwarkanath Thakur, was one of the first industrialists of India. So he is one of the first iron and steel and coal mining person of India. And he had a good relationship with the British East India Company. And he became extremely rich by the time he was 50s. So his son, Maharshi Debendranath, was a little more than Prince Debendranath Thakur. And I mean, Prince Dwarkanath Thakur. So Debendranath used many of these monies for humanitarian purposes and helping others to expand the educational systems of India. So that's why Calcutta or Calcutta had one of the first universities of modern India, the Calcutta University, where all the great people like Ronald Ross and C.V. Raman, S.N. Bose, his guru J.C. Bose, they were all trained and educated. So coming back to Dwarkanath Thakur, he was directly in contact with the steel industries of America through the UK, and Debendranath inherited this knowledge, and he was so inspired that he wanted to create a crystal palace kind of an environment so that the light of the heavens penetrate the glass and steel and create an atmosphere of surrealistic magic, which is a perfect atmosphere which you also enjoy in a Gothic cathedral. And so he took the best of Hinduism and the best of Christianity, and he started the Brahmo movement of India, the Brahmo movement, which is like 80%, 60 to 70% Vedanta and 30% Christianity. So there is a society which was developed by his fellows called ICSPSCK. So C is Christianity and H is Hinduism. So it's a society of a joint movement of religion based on the fruits of Christianity and Hinduism in India. So the house of Tagore was so advanced. This is 100 years back, 150 years back. They were doing all this in Shantiniketan. And they're not doing it in Kolkata. They're doing it in a place which was 150 kilometers away from Kolkata in the lush green of Bengal, which is Birbhum. And that gave Tagore an exposure to the green field living, and he could compose marvelously and worked very closely with the Hindu, Sufi and Islamic saints of Birbhum. And one of them was Lalan, L-A-L-L-A-N, and he started converting the poetries of Lalan and the sutras of the Upanishads and some of the Gospels of the New Testament into his poetry. That was Tagore. And he finally composed Gitanjali, which was requested to be translated into English, and from the United States, from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, it was forwarded to the Nobel Prize Council. And one of the best British poets, E.W. Yeats, when he read his poets, immediately he recommended the book to the Nobel Council at Oslo in Sweden. And then there was a meeting one fine morning, and they looked at the book the whole day, and they decided to give Tagore the Nobel Prize in Literature, the first Asian getting a Nobel Prize. So this is the whole story of the Crystal Palace. So it is in the Crystal Palace Tagore used to sit down and compose some of his divine songs, and today Tagore is a global name. It's a global name. It's a global. Everybody from Doshi to Charles Correa has used Tagore in their life in architecture.